So getting closer to wrapping up this chapter on institutions analysis, diversity of institutions, action arenas, etc. Let's look at what we called the exogenous variable in terms of biophysical conditions and attributes of community. As we will see throughout the book, the rules affect all different aspects of the action arena. The biophysical world also has an important impact on the action arena itself. What actions are physically possible, what outcomes can be produced, how actions are linked to outcomes, and what actors can observe are all strongly affected by the environment around any given action situation. For example, water cannot run uphill. Once you say something, you cannot retract it. The same set of rules may yield entirely different types of action arenas depending on the context. For example, in New York City, there is a regulation that residents of buildings are responsible for removing the snow on sidewalks in front of those buildings within 4 hours after snow ceased to fall. Why does Phoenix not have such a regulation? Because Phoenix does not get much snow. When a freak snow happens, the entire system may shut down and people may not even come out, schools may close, and so on. We will whereas northern states, New York, Massachusetts, especially Illinois, Chicago, New York, Boston, etc., they cannot really shut down. So they want buildings to kick back into action unless it's such a huge snow that even the trucks cannot remove the snow from the roads, and roads can be cleared up, and local buses and trains can start running, and so on. Okay, so when the snow clearing doesn't happen in snowy cities, that is because there is some special reason, whereas in places like Phoenix or Dallas or even parts of Maryland or Virginia, snowfall is rather exceptional, especially heavy snowfall, and the cities may shut down for days if not weeks. So the rules and the biophysical conditions are dealt with in a very different way. We will discuss many case studies in different application domains in this book that will help recognize how context affects decision making and the effectiveness of rules configurations. So rules cannot be set blindly to enforce the same thing in one situation as the other. So biophysical conditions will be very different. This is like playing football outdoors versus an indoor arena, or you can imagine many such action arenas that are going to be affected, severely constrained based on biophysical conditions. Okay. Attributes of the community, how do they matter? A third set of variables that affects the structure of an action arena relate to the attributes of the community of which the participants are members. What are the examples? Examples of attributes that may be important are the shared values within the community, the common understanding and mental models that the community members hold about the world in which they live, the heterogeneity of positions within the community such as class and caste systems, the size of the community, and the distribution of basic assets within the community. Okay, we will see some examples as we go forward, but you can compare again sports, for example, the way New York fans or Boston fans deal with their favorite teams, whether it's baseball or football. You know that that's going to be very different than, let's say, Green Bay Packers or some smaller state teams, and so on and so forth. Some cultural norms are very different, even in a situation like a game, and what the players will be treated like, verbal abuse, etc., and so on. So the teams have to be ready for visiting the Yankee Stadium or the Red Sox Stadium in Chicago, in Boston, and so on. The term culture is frequently applied to the values shared within a community. Culture affects the mental models and understanding that participants in an action arena may share. So a classroom in a marine setting or training for military cadets will not be the same as for ROTC cadets, and the ROTC cadets will be much more rigorous than, let's say, the general students of a class or even a sport or any particular course they are taking. Differences in mental models affect the capacity of groups to solve problems. So you can have people coming from different backgrounds and you can have them put together to, let's say, build a particular project or go collect data or do team projects and so on, and the differences in mental models are going to be implicitly and explicitly affecting the capacity of the problem of the groups to solve problems. For example, when all participants share a common set of values and interact with one another frequently, it is more likely that the participants will be able to craft adequate rules and norms for an action arena. So they may quickly organize themselves into teams, what the roles each one will play, who is in charge, how they respond to the person in charge, the captain or the team leader, the project leader, and so on. And this can happen in many different contexts, in a learning context, in doing actual things, in playing a game, and going on a hike, etc. Right? If the participants have different mental models, come from different cultures, speak different languages, have different religions, it will become much harder to craft effective institutional arrangements. So the institution may be the same, the rules to be followed may be the same, the norms may differ because of different mental models, different cultures, different languages, religions, etc. And the outcome is going to be different, even though the evaluative criteria and the action arena are very much the same. So these are exogenous variables. So action arena and the outcome expected may be the same, but the outcome is very much going to depend on these attributes of the community that is put together. Critical, and this happens typically in, let's say, a military environment, in an office or a factory floor, in a farm where people are gathered to do farm labor, in a game where different players come from different backgrounds, and so on and so forth. Critical reflections then for this chapter. Institutions are rules and norms that structure human interactions, especially repetitive interactions. You are put in the situation again and again, and you have to do some transactions, learning, doing, exchanging, selling, buying, whatever. Then the rules and norms structure these interactions in those situations. They are complex and difficult to study. The institutional analysis and development framework helps us organize our thoughts and direct our questions. So this becomes very good for sustaining the comments then. Okay, the focal element of the IAD, institutional analysis and development framework, is the action arena in which participants interact in an action situation. These interactions lead to outcomes which affect decisions made in the next iteration. The interactions are affected by the social and biophysical context in which the action situation takes place. So we said this repeatedly in the adaptation course, for example, that adaptation is very local. The problem you are dealing with is very local. Could be sea level rise, could be cyclone impacts, could be fisheries going down, could be agricultural productivity falling, could be extreme cold events, extreme heat waves, extreme rainfall, whatever. And each time you have different attributes of the community that has to deal with this situation and adapt, and the biophysical context in which this is happening could be very different. So the exogenous factors are also the finance, the rules by the government, the governance of public finance, etc., etc. Okay, so you can imagine many situations of the commons and the adaptation and the action arena and the attributes and biophysical environment which are going to affect the action and the action arena. Okay, make yourself think. Come up with institutions you deal with every day, some you don't like and some that you do like. You may not like to go to class, but you may like the sports period. Do you think banks should be regulated in their lending practices? So you may want a loan, but you may not like the rules associated with them in terms of how you qualify the loan, qualify for the loan, how much interest you have to pay, what kind of conditions there are on not returning the funds on the loans on time, and so on and so forth. What are the key elements necessary to address this question of banking regulations for their lending practices? What is the most important outcome for you in taking a particular class? Is it just a good grade? Do you want to really learn, have practical experience, or apply the course in a field situation? So it depends on many things. Do experiments in a lab to learn the content better, and so on. What can explain the fact that people solve problems differently in India as compared to the US? Let's say you have a simple thing like a road accident. What do people do in India versus the US? If there is an accident in a busy beltway around the Washington DC, will people stop and help? What happens in India when an accident happens? How quickly will the ambulance come, and whether people will wait till the ambulance? Will the people take the accident victims to the hospital themselves, and so on? You can imagine many other things as well, not just accidents, but dealing with crises of water, of food, of energy, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that concludes this chapter on definition of the institutions, diversity of institutions, action arenas, and exogenous variables that affect the action arena and the actors, and attributes of the community that affect action arenas as well. So we'll come back and meet in the next chapter. Okay.